Ladies and gentlemen, in 40 seconds, the video will be starting. So we would just ask you to be watching for the time clock up here. Welcome to our seniors event in September. Welcome back after the summer break. We're glad that you can join us online. My name is Pastor Wayne Daum, the pastor of Congregational Care here at Wilmot Center. We're so glad that you can join in with us wherever you are at or whenever you're able to view this time together. Today, as we begin this new year of opportunity to gather together in this way, we wanted to share that video, a special thank you to Jesus as we start our monthly senior programs. I'd like to ask the question, where would we be today if it wasn't for Jesus? Charity Gale wrote these words in a song. She wrote, "Thank you, Jesus, for the blood applied. Thank you, Jesus, it has washed me white. Thank you, Jesus, you have saved my life, brought me from the darkness into glorious life." We want to exalt Jesus always during these times. We're very much aware that at this season of the year, there's a tremendous opportunity for us to just rejoice over what we see unfolding and developing all around us, knowing full well that on September the 22nd, fall officially begins, just 11 days from now, but already so much beauty is appearing. Sunflowers have been prominent as well as any other flower around the countryside. Sunflowers just seem to reveal the joy of summer and fall. They look like miniature suns. They brighten a bouquet of flowers, and they do convey an emotion of warmth and friendship. And today I'd like to just share with you some fun facts about sunflowers. My wife and I had an opportunity to go to a sunflower farm up by Atwood, I believe it is. And we saw some of the things and we thought, wow, God's creation. Here's some things that perhaps you don't know. I didn't know it, but you're all so much more brilliant than I am. But first of all, sunflowers originated in North America and have been cultivated in North America for over 4,500 years. And the reason being that the leaves, the stalks, and the roots can all be used as edible food. And it's grown in North America even before corn became commonplace. I'm not quite sure if I'm ready to eat a sunflower leaf or a stalk, but that's what they said. Sunflower seeds, we know, are milled to create flour, as well as the seeds being roasted and eaten or used as sunflower oil for cooking. That much I knew. Now, what was so amazing when we were at that sunflower farm, as the young plants, they were maturing, but as young plants, the flower follows the sun as it moves from the east to the west, and then during the day, and then at night, it turns back to start over again. Now, what we discovered was that the more mature the sunflower gets, then they start just staying facing east, because that helps them to attract bees and other pollinators. Now, we also found out that on average, standard sunflowers reach a height of between 6 and 10 feet, and even taller sometimes. Now, believe it or not, in 2014, a man by the name of Hans-Peter Schaefer in Germany, he grew one that went to 30 feet, 1 inch tall. And it had to be supported by scaffolding. Can you imagine what that would have been like? Now, we also found out that there can be dwarf sunflowers that don't exceed 2 feet. Now, here's something that I did not know. Sunflowers have a remarkable ability to absorb toxins, including zinc, copper, iron, lead, and radioactive waste. Now, get this. Following the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986, scientists planted millions of sunflowers to help the land in that area to recover. Do you remember the tsunami that hit Japan in March the 11th, 2011? It caused the world's worst nuclear accident, as if invisible snow, which doesn't melt, had fallen and covered that area around Fukushima and forced 80,000 people to evacuate. In an effort to lift the spirits of area residents, as well as address the contamination of the land, millions of sunflowers were planted to help absorb the radioactive waste. Isn't that something? Finally, each sunflower is just a single bloom, but each flower head is actually made up of 1,000 to 1,400 potential seeds per flower. All those right there in the happy face. Wow, some fun facts about sunflowers. And we're going to have Carol Weicker. She's going to come and she's going to be leading us in some songs. But you know what the first song's going to be? This is my Father's world. And then trust and obey and leaning on the everlasting arms. I know you've been sitting a long time already. If you can and you would like to stand, why don't you do that as Carol is leading us in singing? Or you can stay seated, whichever you like, and the words will be on the screen. Thanks, Carol.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here. Oh, my pick's gone. Ah. Oh, there it is. It's good to be here. Happy fall almost. Well, you know, when I get asked to help sing some hymns for the seniors group, I enjoy it so much. But I always pray and ask God to show me what songs I should do. And I try to keep with the theme of what's happening. So I thought I'd start with this one. A breaking rocks in the hot sun. I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law and the law won. Anybody know that song? Okay, I'll stop now. All right. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world, I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand, his wonders wrought. This is my Father's world, the birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world, he shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass I hear him pass, he speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world, oh let me ne'er forget, that though the wrong seems off so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world, the battle is not done. Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one. Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one. All right, that's such a powerful song. Sorry, the shadows were hiding my words. We walk with the Lord in the depths of his love. When we walk with the Lord in the light of his word, what a glory he sheds on our way. When we do his good will, he abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. But we never can prove the delights of his love until all on the altar we lay. For the favor he shows and the joy he bestows are for them who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. And in fellowship sweet we will sit at his feet, or we'll walk by his side in the way. What he says we will do, where he sends we will go. Never fear, only trust and obey. trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. You guys are sounding good today, I'll tell you. Well, you always sound good, but this is one of my favorite hymns. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, I have blessed peace with my Lord so near. Oh my goodness, such a good song. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a peaceness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how sweet to walk in this pilgrim way, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how bright the path grows from day to day, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms. I have blessed peace with my Lord so near, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. One more time. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning on the everlasting arms. Amen.
Let's say thank you, Carol. A couple of years ago, I got a text message from Pastor Joel, or Pastor Joel, Pastor Randall, here at the church. It said something like this: Wayne, I'm in a meeting right now. I would like to present to so-and-so tomorrow in the service. This is on a Saturday. I would like to present so-and-so with this gift of $400 tomorrow in the service, but I need gift cards. I don't have time to get them today. Would you be able to help me? I knew what was coming up the next day at the church. And I knew that there was every possibility that this could be a good thing. So I left my home and I went down to the store, the gas station and the store in Baden, and I went in and I asked for 4 cards for $400, $100 each. The cashier looked at me and said, just a moment. She went and got the boss and came back and said, this gentleman is asking for $400. And the lady, the boss said, well, we're only supposed to give $300 at the most. I said, whoa, that's not going to help. I said, it's for my pastor, my colleague, and he needs $400 for tomorrow. She said, well, okay. So they gave me $400 for $100 gift cards. I went back home, and it said on there as well, whatever you do, don't call me because I'm in this meeting. I can't take a phone call. And I knew also that Randall was in a meeting that day. Oh, wow. Anyways, went through some rigmarole as to how to get these gift cards to Randall. And they were gone. And then after Dale and I started talking about it, we said, you know what? That doesn't sound right, does it? I realized that I had fallen for a scam. It cost me $400. And hopefully nobody else has ever done that. I approached Randall then that night and I called him. He said, Wayne, I would never ask you that, first of all. I said, you know what, Randall? I know that. But in the moment, it all seemed to fit. And it was a scam. That's why, along with the encouragement from others, like Randy back there, we thought that it might be valuable for all of us to hear some expert advice on how seniors deal with fraud and scam. And today, we're delighted to have Joshua Rhab with us, from the Detective Constable from the Waterloo Regional Police. And Joshua, we're going to invite you to come forward. And why don't you welcome him today to Wilmot Center?
So like you said, I'm Detective Constable Joshua Rhab. I work in the fraud unit at Waterloo Regional Police. I've been a police officer for 13 years. I've been in the fraud unit for 3 of those years. So what I do, and in our unit, we investigate all frauds over $25,000, which sounds like a big number, but it's actually really not when we look at the number of frauds that come in. And I've got a slide where we just talk about how much money is lost to frauds, and it's quite a bit. So, yeah, we take care of all frauds in the region of Waterloo, so that's Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, as well as the surrounding towns. So I'm going to get into my my presentation. It's not up there yet. So right now you're sending me, I'm seeing everything. Okay. So we're going to get into my presentation. I've really shortened it down because I like to leave time for questions at the end. So I'm going to go through things a little bit quickly, and we can have a chat at the end. So what I'm going to talk about are these statistics. It's one slide really quick. Reasons people don't report fraud, and then I'm going to get into the frauds that are actually taking place. The extortion and emergency scams, which are the biggest scams going on in our region right now. And those ones are a little concerning because they actually target vulnerable people to some extent. Phishing, romance scams, identity theft, and fraud prevention. So I actually just updated this morning. So the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, they are the repository for all fraud information in Canada. They are an RCMP organization, and they are worldwide. So whenever a fraud takes place, a report gets sent to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. Individuals can report to them, or we as the police can report as well. So there's 63,519 fraud reports from Canadians, so that's businesses and people as well. There's a total losses of 569 million, so that's quite a big number, and a large portion of that is actually money that leaves Canada and goes to other countries, so that's concerning in and of itself. And the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre estimates that 5% of victims file a fraud report. So that number is actually quite bigger when we think about it. And the reason they think so few people report fraud is that people feel embarrassed, or they feel shamed, or they feel like they might lose independence if they report. In my time working in the fraud unit, fraud is really a crime that can affect anybody. And we think about the day and age of today, internet, cell phones. I have a Waterloo Regional Police owned cell phone that I'd say like gets fraud calls every day, basically. So they don't know who they're calling. They're just throwing it out there to everybody. Every Canadian is going to have a fraud attempt on them, you know, I'd say almost on a weekly, monthly basis. So I kind of went over this a little bit, but, you know, there's shame, there's guilt, embarrassment, disbelief, you know, a fear of the loss of independence, and that we as the police won't take the reports seriously or there'll be no results. So I'm a big believer that there's a fraud out there for everybody. You know, I present to new Canadians, so that's people who have recently migrated to Canada, and they might be more likely to be targeted in an immigration type scam, or a scam where, oh, you haven't filled out these papers for immigration and now there's a fine, and really it's, you know, it's just bogus. You know, younger people are more likely to be targeted in an investment type scam. You know, elderly people or retirees might be more likely to be targeted in a grandparent scam. So there's something out there for everybody, and you know, it's not any of these things. Anybody can, you know, be targeted in a fraud. You know, whether it was just a story just right now, right? It's almost anybody, and you know, I regularly tell a story. We're coming up to Christmas, so this was Christmas, not last year, but 2 years ago. My wife and I, we ordered some things off Amazon for Christmas presents, and my wife got a text message. Looked like it was from Canada Post. Said, oh, your package has been delayed due to an issue with your address. And we just ordered this stuff off Amazon, so she was kind of expecting that. So she clicks on the link in the message, and it takes you to a website that, you know, it looks like it's Canada Post. And she goes to me, she's like, is this right? And I'm like, I don't know, it looks right. Meanwhile, I do this for a living, right? So I started looking at it, and you know, the website, you know, not all the links kind of work within the website, and then I'm like, oh, this is how people get caught, right? Like I said, I do this for a living, and it's like, oh yeah, it looks pretty good. So it can happen to anybody, really. The extortion scam is the biggest scam going on right now, and it's one that is particularly dangerous. What's happening is, a fraudster, you'll get a call or an email or a text message from a fraudster claiming to be from a government agency, but lately it's actually been from the banks. We've been seeing one where they'll pretend to be the bank, and they'll say, oh, you know, your debit card's been compromised. We need your information, and we're actually going to come pick up the debit card. And then somebody shows up, picks up the debit card, and then they go to town with the debit card. So. But really, so you'll get a text message, a phone call, or an email, and they'll pretend to be any of these agencies. And, you know, I have a few listed here where, you know, your information's been compromised, or they might say they're from the Canada Revenue Agency. They might say, oh, a suspicious package has been intercepted in your name, which, you know, accusing you of a crime. Or I have listed here, you know, your password's been compromised, your account information, a package is undeliverable, or any problem that needs your information to solve. So it's almost like now how you protect yourself is just like assume everything's a fraud until you know it's not. So these fraudsters have it's a computer just like this, and it's a robo-dialer. So, you get a phone call from these fraudsters or whatever. You answer the phone, you say, hello, hello, and there's nobody there. And really what that is that's the robo-dialer. So it's a computer that makes thousands of phone calls a minute. So it's not actually a person on the other end. So when you say hello, that's when it starts connecting you to the person. So that's why you say hello, there's nobody there for a second because it's in the process of connecting you to somebody. With that robo-dialer, they can make it look like any phone number is calling you. So, lots of times they'll use 226 or 519 for our area code, or they might use 613 for Ottawa if they're pretending to be a government agency. You can't trust your call display anymore. And I tell a lot of people too, I'm like, if I don't know who's calling, I won't answer the phone anymore, basically. Which is kind of a sad way to live, but at the same time, it's part of fraud prevention. And lots of times too, I'll just let a call go to voicemail, because if it's important, they'll leave a voicemail, right? A lot of the way these bad guys work is they'll make people feel scared or threatened. Like if they don't do something right away, something bad is going to happen. And the reason they want people to feel that way is because, if you're worried or scared, you're not likely to think, what is actually going on. So have you been pressured to make a payment or provide your information, or threatened with a fine, arrest, jail, deportation, that will show up at your door if you don't pay immediately? So a lot of times, the big one that is still going on, it's the grandparent scam. I'm sure you've heard of it, where, you'll get a call from a family member who's in trouble. And it's very jarring, because if you hear someone you care about's in trouble, your first thought is, how can I help? You're not thinking, is this a scam? And it almost puts you in a panic. So lots of times the bad guys will say, oh, you can't tell anybody, otherwise you're going to be indicted in the crime as well. And the reason they want you to not tell anybody, because if you tell someone, that person might notice, hey, something's not right here. So me as a police officer, when I call people, I have to be professional for the most part. These bad guys will not. They'll make you feel scared. They'll make you feel threatened. That's something to look out for. Like I said, I've already been into this a little bit. They might entice you by having all the right information, and that could have been obtained through a number of different ways. I know in the news a lot, you might see like, oh, a data breach with X company, and you think, oh, well, whatever. Well, little did you know that company was working with a company that you bought something from online, and now your information is out there. So people ask me, well, how is my information out there? And it's like, there's a million different ways your information could be out there. So bad guys might try and entice you by having all of the right information that could have been gotten through another fraud. And I say this at the bottom there, no one should be coming to your door to pick up anything. So this was a particularly dangerous crime, the grandparent scam, and now this debit card scam, because the bad guys were actually coming to people's houses. And that represents a really big risk, right? Because they're actually physically there. A lot of these frauds happen over the internet, but these ones, people were actually showing up to people's doors. So no one should be coming out to your door to pick up money or your debit card or credit card. Way to protect yourself, Pastor mentioned the gift card. Gift cards are a very big conduit for scams, but we also see a lot in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. But really bad guys in the grandparent scam, they were picking up cash at people's doors. So really you have to be careful with, how they're accepting this money. How do they want this money? If you're making a payment to the government, it should be payable to the Bank of Canada, things of that nature. Also too, in Canada, we don't operate like the United States. So, we have a bail system where no money is actually paid up front. In the United States, it is. So no police officer, no one will ever ask for money to absolve anyone of a crime or to get anyone out of jail. A really big thing is, call someone, a friend, a family member, rest of the police. I'd rather spend 5 minutes on the phone with somebody than, months and months investigating. And we as the police, we're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can come into the police station. And a big fraud prevention thing that I tell a lot of people is if, you're being targeted by the bank or targeted by the police, go into the actual bank, come into the police station, deal with people in person, because that's a surefire way you're not going to be defrauded. Also, when COVID happened, nobody wanted to do anything in person anymore, which really, really helped the bad guys, right? So I encourage people, go into the bank, come into the police station, deal with people in person, and you're much better off that way. Hang up the phone, that's another one too. So like I mentioned the robodialer earlier, these bad guys are just putting it out to as many people as they can. And time is money for them. So if they think the fraud's not gonna work on you, they're just gonna move on to the next person. So just hanging up the phone is a barrier to this fraud. And when I'm dealing with somebody who, I want to arrest or who is in trouble with me, if they just hang up on the phone with me, that's not the end of it, right? But for these bad guys who are sometimes in other countries around the world, when you hang up the phone, it's the end of it for them because they just move on to the next person. Do your own research. So a lot of ways that people are figuring out that this is a fraud is if they go into the police station. Oh, no, the police don't have my loved one under arrest. I found out from the police officer in person. So do your own research, fact check the information. I include a bit about phishing because people often ask me, what is phishing? And it's phishing with a PH, but it's helpful to think of actual phishing, like throwing out a line trying to catch a fish or throwing out a net to catch a fish. They often don't have people's information up front. They're just throwing it out there just to see what they can get. And if they target 100,000 people and they get 2 or 3 at $30,000 each, that's worth it to them, right? So phishing, you might get a call, a text message, or an email, and it appears to be from a legitimate organization. And it's always something new, too. People always ask me, well, what should I look out for? And often it's something new all the time. Like, I remember like a few months ago, I was getting ones that claimed to be from Netflix, and your password's been compromised. And then, now it's this new debit card scam. So everybody always laughs about the Nigerian prince scheme. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's a really old one where, you're a relative of a Nigerian prince and you're the last relative and, you're owed this money. And it's a big joke because, it's so unbelievable now. But the reason it's a joke and everybody knows about it is because for a period of time it worked. Lots of people lost money in that scam. What happened was people started to catch on. So they moved on to a new scam. So they're always changing. They're always trying to find new ways to take people's money. And once people start to catch on, they just move on to something else. Same type of advice here, just delete the email, delete the text message. Don't click on the links. If you're actually concerned, if your credit card's been compromised, there's a phone number on the back of the credit card. Call that number. Don't just trust the information that you're getting in this email, text message, or phone call. So confirm the information yourself. Log into your online accounts and make sure that everything's fine. Romance scams were really big when I started out in fraud about 3 years ago. I want to say in the past couple months, they've kind of crept up again. What ends up happening is people are online and they think they're meeting a new friend or starting a new relationship. But meanwhile, they're being targeted in a fraud. So the bad guy will actually steal people's pictures from social media and use them as their own and pretend to be that person. And it will be fast love, like they'll, want to work within like a month or two. And suddenly they'll have a crisis that needs money to solve. Oh, I've got a loved one in the hospital. I've been hit by a car. I need money to come and see you. Or they'll have an investment opportunity. And the only way to solve that is with money. I really like this picture because it shows, the person thinks they're getting flowers, but really it's a bad guy on the other end. And you, in this and all frauds, when it's online, when it's over the phone, you have no idea who's on the other side, right? And almost all of these romance frauds, the person claims to work internationally and need money to help. That could include, you know, an accounts receivable. Oh, we need your account to receive money for me because I'm getting this job. And really then you're receiving the money into your account that's from a fraud, and you're sending it along to somebody else, so that when I decide I'm going to look into that fraud, I find somebody who really just thought they were doing a good thing for someone they cared about, when really they were laundering money. I always include this last one, but it's, you know, it's not always the case. But I find in a lot of these romance scams, these people are in other parts of the world, so their English might not be the greatest, so that can sometimes be a red flag. We've really been normalized, though, to, I know if you ever have like a customer service issue and you call, it's like you're almost always talking to somebody from India. Like, we've been really, really normalized to dealing with people from other countries for these types of issues. That's why I say it's just something to look out for. Again, don't share your personal information. Wire transfer, gift cards, cash, cryptocurrencies, stuff to stay away from. In these romance scams, people were sending actual cash in boxes through Purelator. And again, they might ask you to receive money on behalf of somebody else and then send it along, so that when I come looking, I just find another victim. Never accept money from somebody you don't know either. So like I said, when I come looking, I think, oh, I'm going to go arrest the person I found who got the money. And really, it's just somebody else who's been a victim as well. So don't accept money from somebody you don't know. I include this one really just because of the last point there, shoulder surfing. It seems to come and go. And actually skimming is crept back up again. So skimming is, used to see it a lot at gas stations, where it'd be that fake terminal. And you'd insert your card in and put your information. It was a fake terminal. It was just recording your information. We found a few of those lately. In shoulder surfing, what they would do is they would, you're in Walmart or whatever, and they'd kind of peek over your shoulder and look at you and put your debit card PIN. And then in the parking lot, they'd bump into you, and suddenly your debit card is missing. Really, all this to say, you need to be careful when you're paying for things and making sure that nobody's watching you, or everything looks right with the payment stuff. So Equifax and TransUnion, they are the two big credit agencies in Canada. So whenever anybody's victimized in a fraud, I always say, talk to TransUnion and Equifax. So what they do is, so you know how you can go to like Canadian Tire and get a credit card in like 10 minutes or whatever, right? What ends up happening is the company ends up calling Equifax and TransUnion to check your credit. So when you report that you've been victimized in a fraud to Equifax or TransUnion, then what happens is they put a flag on your account. So it makes it so bad guys can't take out credit cards, bank loans, car loans in your name, because Equifax and TransUnion are notified. Destroy your important documents or keep them safe. Really, all that information, used to be that people would sort through people's recycling bins and find people's mail. Well, on your mail, it's got your name and your address, and that's part of the equation right there. So you just want to make sure to secure those things. Again, like I don't even answer my phone anymore unless I know who's calling. But be wary of unsolicited phone calls, phone calls that come out of the blue. One of the best fraud prevention methods is to be up to date on your accounts. So I know with like my online banking, it's like I'm almost in there like almost every day, right? So if there's a fraudulent charge, I'll see it right away. So that's a good fraud prevention technique. So make sure you regularly check on those things. Confirm your address on file, report any lost things to the bank. Take time to verify the story and do your research. Like I said, a lot of people find out they've been victimized once they call the police, once they go into the bank. So verify the story. Don't give out personal identity or financial information. I know a lot of these, especially on the grandparent scam, they might call and say, oh, it's your grandson, I've been in an accident. They say, oh, Jack, and suddenly they know, like, Jack, right? So don't give out that information. Don't send money to people you don't know and trust 100% and you haven't met in person. And like I said, deal with people in person. Like I said, when somebody's being targeted, I had somebody the other day say, I got a call from them pretending to be a CIBC. And they actually do bank with CIBC. And so to solve the fraud, they did actually have to deal with CIBC. So I'm like, what you're going to do now is you're going to go in. Every single time you need to deal with this fraud with CIBC, you go in, because there's no way for you to know if it's the fraudster or actually CIBC calling you. So I'm encouraging people to go into the bank, go into the police station, deal with people in person. I have already said this, but you can't trust your call display. Gift cards, Bitcoin and stuff like that are just something to stay away from. Be wary of requests for secrecy or cover story. And we always say that because, like I said, they don't want you to tell anybody else about this fraud, because if you do, that person might know that something's wrong. Talk to a friend, a family member, someone you trust. And I always have to include this. You can't win a prize in a lottery or contest you didn't enter, and in Canada there are no taxes or upfront fees for prizes, because that scam refuses to go away. So you won a prize in a lottery and there's fees suddenly, and it's like, well, if you're going to win $1 million, what's $10,000, right? So document everything. Contact Equifax and TransUnion. Contact your bank or credit card company. Contact the legitimate agency. So if it's, the police, or they're saying it's Canada Post or whatever, contact that legitimate agency and confirm that information. Report to the Anti-Fraud Center and report to us. You'll notice I list us as the police very low on that list there. So we have it where, so let's say I send a bank wire to somebody for $50,000 and I realize, that was wrong, that was a mistake. Reporting to the bank first is the best way for that money to be stopped, because the bank will then try and stop that bank wire from going through. So the first call should be to the bank. If somebody calls us first, we have no controls over the banks. We can't do those things. So I'm telling people, take all these steps first and then call us. I have a few links here. They don't always work, but let's go to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center website. It doesn't work. So the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center website, if you just go to Google and type in Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, you'll get their website. All the stats that I got, all the fraud information I get, it's all from them. Maybe about a year ago, I had somebody call me. It's the weirdest thing. So they say, I've got a timeshare in Mexico, and I've been defrauded with that timeshare, and I've never heard of this before. So the way the fraud works is they have a timeshare. Somehow that timeshare information was compromised. So the bad guys have all the information of everybody who owns a timeshare. And they call up that person and say, look, we want to make a new development. So we're buying these timeshares up. They're worth $100,000, but we're actually, because we want to get all of them to build a new development, we're paying $200,000. Person says, that's great. Double my money on my timeshare, no problem. And it sounds like they're going to make all this money. And what ends up happening is, there's a fee for the taxes on selling it. The person has to pay. This person ended up paying like $35,000 for different fees and, taxes, government, banks, all that stuff. And at the end, the sale actually wasn't real. So I'm like, that's weird. I've never heard of that before. So I go to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center website, and sure enough, listed right there, timeshare resale scam. So they have all the information for timeshares. They have all the information for scams in Canada, every single one, and they have all the trends there as well. Again, Equifax and TransUnion have their own website that you can report to oftentimes. Sometimes they want a phone call as well. That's it for my presentation. Like I said, I went through things a little bit fast because I like to leave time for questions and comments. So that's it. Sure. Yeah.
Do you deal with mortgage frauds at all?
I know mortgage frauds are a thing. We, in our region, haven't had any reports of them in my time in the fraud unit, if I'm thinking of the correct mortgage scam that you're talking about, where your house will be sold from under you using lawyers and real estate agents. I know I'd heard it was a big thing in Toronto. That Toronto had a number of them. Really, it's a very tough scam to pull off because oftentimes you'll need a crooked lawyer and crooked real estate agents and stuff like that. So I myself have never investigated one. They're pretty rare, but they do happen. Now, I think part of the fraud prevention on that was to have title insurance, I think, on your home. And what that does is it prevents, if there's any issues with the title being transferred, which is how the mortgage fraud works, that you're compensated from an insurance standpoint. So insurance, which I always joke is the oldest scam in the history of scams, but title insurance is actually the way to prevent that fraud. So.
Yeah, I get a lot of calls from charitable organizations. I wondered, how do you tell the difference between a legitimate charitable organization and one that's not?
So the way, I try to think of myself and the way I would approach that. So the other day I was dealing with an investment company, so to say, that, was not involved in the fraud, but they were a mechanism for the money moving in the fraud. So what I did was I went to the FinTrack website. FinTrack, have you heard of FinTrack? What it is, it's anti-money laundering. So whenever there's a transaction more than $10,000 in Canada, they're notified. Banks do it, all casinos do it now. But I found out this company was registered with FinTrack. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean they're 100% legitimate, but it's a step in the right direction. So for a charity, I believe all legitimate charities have to be registered in some way. So what I would do is, if you're not sure, try and figure out if that charity is registered and figure out that information yourself. Whenever I get a fraud report, the first thing I do is I start Googling, right? So I'll go to a company's website and I'll start clicking around and see what kind of information I can find there. And obviously the more information, the better, right? So when I see, fraudulent websites or fraudulent companies, their websites are kind of wonky looking a little bit, and there's not a lot of information. So I just tell you need to do research. But yeah, I would say maybe that first kind of step was making sure they're registered, and fact checking that might be the best way to kind of make sure. And then all those other things like doing research, looking it up, finding out what they do, those would be kind of secondary steps.
Just a couple questions or to get your thoughts on. I'm part of an app in Paris, where I'm from, a next door neighbor app or whatever. So there's been a lot of chatter back and forth on how you deal with these people. If they call your home and you pick it up and it's this or that, I want to clean your ducts, was a big one way back when. And of course people are being funny, well, I've got a siren that I put into the phone, I have this dog barking thing or whatever I start speaking another language. Some people, like you say, just hang up or whatever. I've always said to my mom, God bless her, don't answer the darn phone. Unless you know it's me calling on the thing, just leave it, as you say, to leave a message. But if you do feel that you know the number, I had one the other day, 519-442, it's a Paris number, but I said to my daughter, I don't know that number. Do you know that number? No, I don't. So I didn't answer it, nor did they leave a message on the thing. So right away I knew, it was a scam type call. But what are your thoughts on that? Like if you do pick it up and go, holy tamale, do you hang up right away? Do you tell them to take a hike? Or what's your recommendation to get them to not call again?
So if there was a way to stop them from calling, we would have done it already. You might have noticed sometimes when you get a fraud call or a fraud text, a lot of what's happening now is you'll see likely fraud or likely spam or scam on your phone now. So that's the telecoms, they're flagging numbers and they're doing fraud prevention on their end. What I would say is if you answer the phone and it's a fraud or a scam, I just would say hang up right away. You don't even need to say anything. You just hang up, right? And then, like you said, if answering, don't answer the phone. If it's important, they'll leave a message, right? Of course, you're left with, who was it? Who was it? But at the same time, too, who cares, right? So if it's important, they'll leave a message or call back, right? So I think those two are the best way, just not answering the phone or hanging up right away. Like I said, with me as the police, if somebody hangs up the phone on me, it's not the end, right? Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, now I've got to go out and meet that person. And, I got to prove to them I'm a police officer and things of that nature. So if it's legitimate, that won't be the end of it, right? So, and two, if you're ever concerned, it's Visa or MasterCard or the bank, call that number yourself. Look on the back of the card, there's a phone number, call that number, and you can say, is there fraud or whatever, and they'll say, no, it's not. And that'll be the end of it too, right? These bad guys don't want you to do that because that means the fraud is over, right? So they want to trap people, answer the phone, and then catch them and, start the whole ball rolling, so.
We were talking about mortgage and title scams. Just this past week in Brantford, I was reading an article where the senior lost her home in January, finding out that there was $374,000 worth of liens taken against. And as you mentioned, it has to do with, a corrupt mortgage person, corrupt lawyer, whoever might have access to registering a lien on that. And it was a result out of a renovation scam. And I always thought that this door-to-door selling was something of the past, that no one could approach you and say, hey, do you want to put a deck on your home, or hey, do you want to do this or whatever. Now, I know, like you said, it was a GTA, and coming from Milton 35 years, a lot of that stuff happens down there. Do you think there's a possibility that that's moving this way, it's moving west, that there may be more people that are going to get caught up in this? Whether you're, 35 or 55, it's a trusting situation.
So when we're talking about mortgage scam and that lien on the home scam, we're actually talking about two different scams. So the mortgage scam involves your home actually being sold to somebody else, your entire home. And title insurance doesn't prevent that from happening, but it insures you against that happening. The lien is actually a different scam. So what bad guys do is they'll go door to door. I'm from X energy company, and you qualify for a grant. Blah 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 blah. We'll get you a new a new water heater, softener, furnace, air conditioner. And what they'll end up doing is they'll jack up the price on those things. I saw one just last week, $40,000 for a heat pump, water softener, and water heater. Well, you can buy all those things for less than $10,000 at Home Depot. So they were charging $40,000, and it was part of a loan that was at 13.99%. Well, if you go to the bank, you can get a loan for 5 or 6%, in and around that area. So what they'll do is they'll jack the price on the products, jack it on the loan, and then you'll have monthly payments for items that you basically already had. Then, so what they used to do was they'd issue a notice of security on your property. So essentially a lien. You couldn't sell your home without that lien being replaced first. So what they were counting on is they were counting on the person dying. There's an elderly person they were targeting. And then when the next of kin would go to sell the home, what they do is, there's a lien on it. We just want to get this thing sold. They pay off the lien. So that's what was happening. Recently, a colleague of mine, you can look this up online, he had some legislation passed where notices of securities are no longer allowed in Ontario, and any existing notice of security has been expired. So he spearheaded this new legislation that's preventing that from taking place. Now what they're doing is it's just a straight up loan. So that loan will accrue interest, and it's for $40,000, and it'll just keep going and going and going and going. So what was supposed to happen is door-to-door sales are actually banned in Ontario. But if I told you that people were doing illegal things, would that surprise you? So what they'll do is they'll go to door, and they're actually targeting elderly people. And part of the paperwork that they fill out has it pre-filled out that I wasn't doing this door to door. So when we look at the contracts, we're left with, oh yeah, they said in the contract that they weren't door to door, and the person signed it. And sorry, when I was talking about the whole contract thing, there's nothing fraudulent at face value about that contract. So if they're going to sell you a water heater, softener, and heat pump for $40,000 at 13.99% interest, that's a terrible deal. Doesn't mean it's fraud, right? If I say these shoes are worth $20,000 and someone agrees to buy them for $20,000, is that fraud? Or is it, something's only worth what someone will pay for it. So those contracts, they're for the most part not fraudulent. But what was happening is it's a bad deal, and we're getting the call afterwards because most of the time it's an elderly person being exploited. So we're working our way through new legislation now on that second one, and we'll have to see what ends up happening. Like I said, these bad guys, a new law is passed, doesn't mean they're going to stop, right? They're just going to try and figure out a new way to do things. So frauds are going to continue to change. A lot of these frauds, what I'm telling a lot of people is, if you have somebody in your life who's, vulnerable in some way, you got to do those extra steps. Got to make sure you're checking in with them, making sure they're okay and they're not getting targeted. My grandmother, I check up on her once a week or whatever, right? And then my father does too. And it's like, the way we're going to prevent fraud from happening is by being there. And she says, I got a call, and this didn't happen. But if she says she got a call, first thing she'd do is talk to me or my dad, right? So being there, because you can't be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but you have to be aware of it. So I told this lady, I said, look, your father who signed up for this terrible contract, you might have to start thinking about what you're going to do, because you can't be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And these bad guys have his information now, and maybe they come back next week, right? So it's kind of like awareness and, taking those right steps. So.
Do you think social media has a lot to do with this? Like, as opposed to, say, 15, 20 years ago, we got the Twitters, we got the X, we got everybody posting their whole life on Facebook, that information is out there for the fraudsters to get. Like, how do you get your grandson's name?
Yeah. I would say, not just social media, but the internet in general has kind of allowed these fraudsters to kind of flourish in the way that, on that picture that I showed, they can pretend to be whoever they want on the internet. They can pretend to be whoever they want on the phone, without going off on like a really big tangent. AI and how AI kind of affects our lives is really going to change in the future, right? So right now, when you get that fraud call, it's that robo-dialer, right? And they're going to put through somebody on the other end. In the future, it won't even be a person. It'll just be a computer, and it'll be AI. And the thing about AI and computers is they work a million times faster than a human. So what they'll do is that computer will initiate a call to you on its own without a person. Once you pick up the phone and they get a little bit of information from you, they'll be able to pull your loved one's social media. I don't know if people have seen deep fakes around here, but what they might be able to do is pull loved one's social media, videos, and they can actually, if you say, I've seen this, if you say 50 words into this AI machine, what it can do is it can formulate any word basically using those 50 words. So people will get phone calls from these computers that can imitate that loved one's voice, using videos from social media, so it'll actually sound like you're talking to the loved one on the phone, but it's actually all just a computer. So in the future, social media, internet, technology will kind of make fraud more difficult to detect in some ways, but easier to detect in other ways. Like I mentioned, you might have probable fraud or probable scam on your phone now, which you didn't have years ago. So technology advancing to help fraud is also technology going to advance to detect fraud as well. And I mentioned deepfake. You don't have to go far to find a deepfake video, and a lot of them are like Elon Musk or Justin Trudeau advertising Bitcoin, and people actually do fall for that as well. So it's almost like you can't trust anything anymore. And that's why I'm telling people, deal with people in person, go into the bank, come to the police station. A lot of these investment frauds, it's like, oh, it's happening online. Well, I'm like, I'm not that old. I'm like, what happened to people walking into the bank and saying, I've got money to invest? What happened to that? No, it's all online nowadays. So I'm like, go in, deal with people in person.
So the best thing you're saying is get rid of these things. That's where the guys come from.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I've got a work cell phone and a personal cell phone, and our whole lives are on that thing. In a lot of ways, it's made our lives better and easier. I can talk to the people I love from anywhere, you know what I mean? At the same time too, right? Like you're getting these emails, these text messages, these phone calls on your cell phone. Like I think you've just got to understand that, with the cell phones, you're going to be targeted constantly. Like fraud is weird. So, shootings or violent crime is up. Well, what are the chances you're going to be nearby when a shooting takes place? Probably pretty low, right? What are the chances you're going to be targeted in a fraud? Well, a bajillion %, because we all have cell phones and we all get these calls now. So fraud is different than other crimes, right? So it's almost like you've got to take extra steps to prevent it now more than ever.
I was just going to say, that was one of the first time that we sent out an email or a text message announcing this kind of a function. We did not put at the beginning Wilmot Center. And so people were hesitant, who is this? So that's one of the ways that you're going to be able to identify Wilmot Center is inviting you. And we're always identifying the email or the text message that way. Sherry has a question.
If you get a phone call and that, and they're wanting a whole bunch of information and so on, and you say no, and then you call them back and you get a completely different number, because my husband did that, and it turned out he ended up getting a phone call from the police because the ones that were bugging him, they were the bad guys, and he would put a message on the number that was coming up, and it turned out to be a perfectly nice person. But now he just calls the person and says, your phone number has been hacked. Is that all right to do?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, on that, I've heard of us as the police being impersonated in these frauds. Oh, it's Waterloo Regional Police. Well, anybody can pretend to be Waterloo Regional Police on the phone, right? And yeah, people's phone numbers have been taken over in frauds. It's very difficult to do. It does happen, though. But, like you mentioned there, and like Pastor's story at the beginning, you got to question everything, basically, right? And the phone numbers and stuff. It's almost like you got to treat everything like it's fraud and then fact check it back and then that's the only way to really prevent it, right? So another thing is, just be wary of people asking you for money, right? Like, just say no to people asking you for money, and then you're also safe that way too.
Questions? Couple more questions?
Sure.
Are you aware of any software that we can put on our phones and computers? Like I know in my case with the phone call, it's like call display, and this is the person who's calling, who I've never heard of before. And on the computer, there's an ability to see the URL. So somebody's trying to sell you property, and it's Sally's pet store or whatever.
I'm not aware of any specific technology from a prevention standpoint, but you mentioned the URL, right? Like looking at the URL is a fraud prevention technique, right? Like it should say Canada Post instead of Canada POOST, you know what I mean? So, but like I said, technology is advancing too, and things are happening behind the scenes, like where you'll see probable fraud when a phone call comes in and stuff, right? So things are happening behind the scenes. And, when the pastor mentions, oh, we're only supposed to sell $300 in gift cards, well, that's probably because bad guys want fraud money in gift cards. So people were buying thousands of dollars, right? So they probably input this policy to stop fraud in some way, okay? So there's immense pressure on the banks nowadays. So if, you go to the bank to take out $5,000 in cash, the teller might say, well, what's this for? And the right answer, it used to be sometimes, none of your business. But, they're asking that because they're under pressure to stop this too, right? So people are saying, well, why didn't the bank ask any questions? And, an elderly person coming in taking $5,000 of cash, well, the bank should have stopped this. So there's things happening behind the scenes for fraud prevention as well. Things are changing over time. Technology is changing. I would say there's no specific software or anything like that, but you don't have software on your phone, and now the telecoms are doing that. So things are changing. Just you got to take the right steps. So.
Further to the last lady's comment, you need to be aware that the bad guys can literally make that phone number say anything they want. I had one a couple of weeks ago, and it didn't even clue me in with getting the ones that are likely spam. I got one that said, valid call. And I picked it up, and then I went, oh no, going.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing too is, right, like they can make it say whatever they want, right? It's like sometimes it was like letters V and then a whole bunch of like 20 numbers. Do you know what I mean? And like, I'm not answering that. But and that's the other thing too, likely fraud or likely spam. That's great. It's not going to stop them all, right? So you can't rely on that for the fraud detection. You still have to be vigilant because bad guys will figure out a way around it. And who knows, right? Like I said, they're always changing. They do this professionally, right? Like this is what they do. And when I see money go to India, Malaysia, stuff like that, I'm almost willing to bet it's super organized there. A lot of third world countries where they might not have jobs for people, they might not have a lot of money, and people go to work at the call center where they're calling and defrauding people all the time. So.
Joshua, thank you so much. Now, we realize that there probably are more questions. Are you going to be available?
Yeah, I'll stick around.
You don't have to go out and get somebody? No. Just asking. But if you perhaps have further questions and you would like to talk to Joshua, he'll be right up here and talk that way. But you know what I was thinking as I've been sitting here listening? No wonder the Word of God says, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And somewhere in all of this, there's a wisdom that we need to be receiving from in here. And, even in that, what I shared with you, There was something that just wasn't adding up, and there were some restrictions that I was not paying attention to. And even that dear lady over there, that's exactly what she told me after. That's why we do this, because I went back to see, could we stop this? She said, no, sorry. Now, what do we do in a case like this then? Are we totally helpless? Is it any wonder the Word of God says, do not fear. Do not let your hands hang limp. The Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save. He will take great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love. He rejoices over you with singing. He's on our side. I do believe, Joshua, that time is always on our side. Is that correct? We don't have to make a snap decision. Is that right? And if you need time to research something, do it. Instead of at the moment or at the door or something like that, we've got time. And when the enemy doesn't have time, he's always running short of time. And he wants to do something now. And that's the number one problem that I had. That's where I missed it. Randall needs that money today. Well, $400 is over in India, I think. I don't know where it is. It went somewhere. But, dear people, this is not meant to be a time to be afraid. The Lord says, in this world you shall have tribulation. Be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. We need to start listening here. Those of you that are online, I trust that you've been appreciating what's been happening here today as well. And we trust that you are being made aware of some of the dangers that are out there, and that you're being equipped as to what to do, how to avoid. My desire is that you will go from this time today and remembering the Lord still loves you. He has a plan for your life. He wants to walk with you in every decision that you make. And may we indeed be wise as serpents, harmless as doves, because the Lord is on our side. Listen what he's trying to tell you. God bless you. We'll see you next month, October the 9th. We'll be having the Lifted Voices here, a group of, I believe, 6 ladies that will be singing and sharing. We sure would love to have you join us. God bless you. Have a great time. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.